In the second half of the first 1,000 years of Christianity, there were many artists' renderings of the resurrection, which portrayed Jesus as breaking free from the tomb while also freeing Adam and Eve from the clutches of death. The understanding was that Adam and Eve represented all of humanity, and that here was Jesus escaping the clutches of death with humanity in tow. And this is a picture of resurrection as a universal act. Universal such that resurrection means life, not for Jesus alone, but for all of us. And it is interesting to note that in almost every case, the art depicting this universal resurrection is usually inscribed with the word anastasis, which is a Greek word translated as uprising. Uprising. And what a provocative choice of words. It is as if our ancestors of the faith wanted to emphasize how revolutionary resurrection really is, how defiant and rebellious Jesus was against death, as if maybe the charges of insurrection were actually right. But how defiant and rebellious Jesus was against death, not just for himself, but for us too. And so resurrection as an uprising gives us a sense that life is asserting itself. A defiant reclaiming of life from the forces of death. It's a powerful image. It's a powerful image. And I'm probably going to unnerve you. I know some of you said, oh, I'm not one of those people who gets out in the streets. Well, I'm about to disappoint you because Jesus is. Jesus is. Jesus, the image, the leader at the forefront of an uprising. An uprising for all of humanity. An uprising against the bondage of sin and death and oppression. Now, I was worried about this because I said, someone is going to, this resurrection, this uprising, probably, it kind of invites us, it inserts a little bit of shock and awe back into a season that has been domesticated by bunnies and chocolate and the arrival of spring. And don't get me wrong, I love bunnies and chocolate and the arrival of spring. But I want us to keep this early rendering of resurrection as uprising in our minds as we see the women arrive to the empty tomb. I've been thinking all this month that this was the first women's march. I've been thinking that leave it to the women. Leave it to the women to say, no, we're not giving up so easy on the one who was advocating for us. And from the beginning of this story, Luke has been telling us that everything in this gospel, especially what happens on this morning, is a proclamation of eyewitnesses and servants of the word. And so that Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary, the mother of James, and the other women would assume the roles of eyewitnesses and servants of the word right after the empire has so cruelly and efficiently executed Jesus. It suggests a courage and a commitment that the male apostles couldn't even muster. So that's why I call it the first women's march. Because when a marginalized and discounted people defiantly express their allegiance to the one who has been crushed by a seemingly absolute power of the government, we have the makings of an uprising. We have the makings of an uprising. Now, the women don't quite know that they're part of an uprising. That's how church folk are. We don't really know that we're a part of something revolutionary right away. And so like many of us, they assumed that the empire had won. They assume that the flow of time in life ends in death, and that's all you write. They assume that might makes right, and that life is short and brutal, and there's no fighting empires and winning. And so they go to the place of death to do the stuff of burials and funerals. And they mourn, and they want to anoint him, and they want to say farewell, because that's what you do when life ends. But when they get there, when they get to the graveyard, they actually don't see death. Isn't it interesting? They went to a graveyard, to tomb, looking for death, and they don't see death. On the contrary, they saw something other than death. This is where I want you to get that imagination working. They saw something other than death. It's disorienting. It's incomprehensible. Men in dazzling clothes. Are they men really? Are these angels? Are these the transfigured bodies? Who are they? But whatever they are, there's a tip-off. They're not dead. This isn't death. As a matter of fact, this is a tip-off that there's some divine activity going on in our midst. And they were terrified. They were in the presence of life, and they were terrified. And that's why the messenger said, and I love it, it has such spiritual brio. It's as if Jesus orchestrated. I love it. I tell you, if I were in the heavenly hosts, I'd be like, whoa, I can't wait for the line. Why do you look for the living among the dead? Why are you at this grave, this tomb, looking for living things, living people, living? Why are you here? He is not here. He is not here, but has risen. And that's all they needed to hear. I'm telling you, it was a women's march. That's all they needed to hear. And then they remembered. They remembered that God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. They remembered what Jesus said, that they will kill the Son of Man, and on the third day, he will reclaim life. And so they ran off. They ran off to tell the apostles, eyewitnesses, servants of the word, realizing that life found a way. And they rush off to tell. But wait, didn't they lose? Didn't Jesus' ministry just fall apart when they arrested and crucified him? Isn't death final? Wasn't that public execution of Jesus, wasn't it supposed to frighten them all away? Weren't they supposed to go and hide? It's an uprising going on. You don't hide when the uprising is brewing. You don't go away. You don't shrink when the uprising is brewing. Y'all, something is happening, and the women know it. They know it, so they rush off to tell the apostles what they've seen. And they know he's alive. They can't explain it. They're not going to give you a lecture. He's not there. And the angel said, why are you looking for the living among the dead? And then they remembered, oh, he's alive. There's an uprising brewing here. The power of death can be broken. The power of sin has met its match. The power of hate can be overcome. The power of empire can be broken. The power of love and life is stronger than the powers of the world. The power of love and life can outlast whatever the world does. Oh, the women are finally getting to realize we're a part of something. So they rush. They're not afraid to tell what they had seen. Oh, so now they may not even know it. They take their place in an uprising. They become eyewitnesses and servants of the word. They let the apostles know that life, the fullness of life, has been realized. Christ is risen and life begins. Oh, the disciples dismissed their testimony as an idle tale. But the women remembered and knew the truth. The grave couldn't hold Jesus. And if Jesus can confront sin, death, injustice, violence, and oppression head on and come out victorious on the other side, then they are no longer captive to the plans and prerogatives of empires. Every insurmountable obstacle or oppressive power holding them in bondage, all the ways they have been abused, dismissed, and oppressed, fall away in light of God's promise of new life, new beginnings. They are a part of the resurrection, an uprising against violence, injustice, and the finality of the cross, an uprising against opposition to God's righteous reign. Now, I know there may be some here today who think this story of resurrection, an idle tale, and that's okay. It is hard for us to embrace the fullness of life because we can't wrap our minds around the impossible. The revolutionary character of resurrection seems too big, too uncontainable, too fantastic, that we have become comfortable using less defiant ways of talking about the fullness. What do you mean, Pastor? How have we domesticated? Well, I'll tell you, because we use words like progress and evolution. And here's my favorite, enlightenment. We're progressive people. We're enlightened folk. And so when we tell the world about the evils of racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, all of xenophobia, all of it, when we tell people, people respond by telling us, oh, we have already made so much progress. Oh, we really are evolving. Oh, I'm getting enlightened when I see, when we see the violence we're an enlightened species. But the resurrection has no time for progress. The resurrection has no time for your evolution. It doesn't have time for enlightenment. The uprising is happening now. We're breaking free from those chains right now. We're breaking free from everything that holds us in thrall right now. We're not waiting for progress. Oh, we're breaking the chains of all those isms right now. We're moving forth for new beginnings and new life. We don't have time for you to catch up. Oh, don't look for the living among the dead. All that other stuff is dead and gone. A new world is unfolding. And when the women got to the empty tomb, the divine messengers didn't say, oh, Jesus is making progress. He didn't say, hold on, the evolution is coming. There were no lectures about what happened during resurrection. They said, why are you looking for living people among the dead? Why? He is risen. He's not here. And I want you to remember, let me take this out of the theoretical, because we've been witness to it, and you may not remember that you were, but we have been witness to it. We have witnessed what resurrection as a defiant reclaiming of life from the forces of death and destruction. We've seen it. It's been in our lifetimes. The resurrection of Jesus has been a witness to people throughout history, that we can confront the world, and guess what? We can live after we do it. We've seen it during the early years of the AIDS epidemic, when many in our community succumbed to the ravages of an unknown and ignored disease, and we were losing friends and family and lovers by the thousands. And the LGBT community defiantly reclaimed life, loving, supporting, and taking care of each other when the government ignored us, and when religion declared we didn't deserve life. The formerly enslaved African Americans in this country braved a campaign of terror, violence, and oppression and discrimination to build and rebuild their lives when lynching and desperate poverty were meant to prevent them from experiencing the fullness of life. And right now, you are sitting next to a miracle. Right now, you probably don't even realize it, but you are sitting next to someone that was supposed to be dead right now. You're sitting right next to someone who said you have no life. You're sitting right next to someone who's experienced addiction, poverty, rejection, illness, depression, and they have defiantly reclaimed their lives, and they're sitting right next to you right now. Every day, when we hold on, when we show coverage, we are living the Easter story of resurrection as an uprising. Someone is going to object. I know you're out there, that we still have to face death, Pastor. It ain't getting any better. The empire is not folding up its tent and going away. Oppression is always a beckoning, and racism, sexism, homotransphobia, it's all there waiting for me when I go out these doors. But the tomb is empty, and Jesus' body is gone, which means that whatever we are confronting, Jesus is always there, leading the uprising against all that opposes God. Oh, you don't have to do it alone. We don't have to do it. We don't have to fight alone, because every time we confront it, Jesus is right there. Every cross and every crucifixion is just an opportunity to show that they haven't won. Every cross and crucifixion that awaits us, every one of them, we have the leader of the revolution right next to us, giving us the strength to stand up against all that binds us, to stand up against the sin that has a hold over us, to stand up against death, which steals life and murders our calm, against the systems and structures that try to silence him and definitely seek to silence us. Because Jesus, the source and force leading the uprising. Resurrection isn't a human endeavor alone, nor is a one-time event that happened a long time ago. Resurrection is an ongoing presence in our lives. It is an always event. Oh, I know we get all happy on this day, but I'm inviting you to use your imagination. And when you're in the throes, when it seems like all the forces are weighing you down, remember, I'm a part of a revolution, an uprising against all the wrong things, an uprising against death, against sin, against anything that will bind me. Oh, it's an always event. And I'm so happy because the Holy Spirit reminds me each and every day. It reminds us each and every day that there's a resurrection going on. It's going on right now. You're sitting here, and some of you may not even know it, but we're in the middle of it right now. Every single time we hold on, we are tamping down. And so I go back to that picture of Jesus escaping the tomb, Adam and Eve in tow, victorious over it all, the uprising beginning. And then I look at those zombies in The Walking Dead. I look at the Night King with those frozen zombies. And I say, you just think you won, because I'm a part of a revolution. And Jesus is leading us over. Amen.